Summer Challenge. Sheesh.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Mark Summer Challenge. We got another devotional today. But listen, the thing with these daily devotionals is you see the best and the worst of me. And right now, I just got my wisdom tooth pulled. So if my cheek looks a little extra chubby today, that's why. All right, so just keeping it real with you guys. But we've got another devotional. Got to keep chugging along in Mark. So today, we're in Mark chapter 10, verses 28 through 52. The title of this devotional is The Suffering Servant. And we finally get to the passage that has our theme verse in it that you've been memorizing, Mark 10:45. And we're going to see the suffering servant together. Okay, so we're in the middle of a major transition point in the book of Mark. Chapters 1 through 9 are Jesus' ministry in Galilee. So that describes his ministry in Galilee. Then chapter 10 describes how Jesus starts to transition and move to Jerusalem. And then chapters 11 through 16 is the basically conclusion and gathering, like the consummation of all of Jesus's ministry, the completion of Jesus's ministry, as we see him in his final week, where he eventually is led to the cross and then raises from the dead. So chapter 10 is the middle transition point before we get to chapter 11 and we see Jesus in his final week. And so Jesus is going to spend some more time teaching his disciples, preparing them for what's about to happen, and explaining what must happen in order for sinners to be forgiven and saved, the reason why he came to this earth. And so he's going to continue to tell them about that. I've got 4 points for you today, and we're just going to break this passage up into 4 points, okay? Number 1, the reward, verses 28 through 31. So yesterday we talked about the rich young ruler, and this passage is in sharp contrast to the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler was not willing to give up everything in order to follow Christ, right? That's very sad. He was so attached to his money and possessions and all the things that he had in life that he was not willing to give it all up for Christ. But what we see in this passage, 28 through 31, is the disciples go, look, Jesus, we gave up everything for you. We gave up our entire lives to follow you. Now, what is left for us? What then will there be for us is what we see in Matthew's gospel that Peter asks. What then will there be for us? And Jesus gives a sweet response to his disciples and really to you and I today. If you're a Christian, this is for you. To those who have given up everything in their life to follow Christ. You know, the disciples gave up all of their fishing nets and boats. They gave up their life of fishing, their entire lives, and they got up and they followed Jesus. They left everything behind. So what is our reward if you do that? What happens if you lose everything in this life? Jesus says, one thing you will gain, one thing you will have, and that is a family with Christ. When you become a follower of Christ, you become part of God's family. You have others, hundreds, he said 100 times as much fathers, mothers, sisters, and brothers in Christ. Followers of Christ become family of Christ, part of the church, and this is a sweet, sweet reward. I know, especially for me, when I first got saved, I was so drawn by the family of Christ because my family was broken. So maybe some of your families are broken. You have divorced parents or your family is split up. But when you become a follower of Christ, you become part of Christ's family, part of the church, and they care for you, and they love on you, and they encourage you. And it is the best thing to walk with your family, with Christ. Okay, so that is the reward for believers who give up everything. Number 2, we see the preview, verses 32 through 34. The preview of what Jesus is about to do. Again, Jesus is explaining to his disciples what is about to happen and what must happen. Jesus again explains to his disciples what's about to happen and what's about to unfold in the next chapter. And again, the response by the disciples is pretty shocking. So Jesus explains to them that he's going to be led to a cross, he's going to suffer, and he's going to die on a cross, and then he's going to raise from the dead. Now imagine Jesus explaining this to you. You've already seen how the disciples have responded before. Peter goes, "Don't let this happen, Jesus. Don't let this happen." And Jesus goes, "Get behind me, Satan, because this must happen. This is what must be done." But this time, the disciples respond in a very prideful and self-promoting way. And we see that with point number 3, called the servant. Point number 3, the servant. Verses 35 through 45. This is where we finally get to our theme verse. What we see in verses 35 through 45 is a sharp contrast between the prideful disciples and the humble servant, the humble suffering servant, which is Jesus. It is quite shocking to read how prideful and self-promoting these disciples are. To make a bold request, they say, "Jesus, and give us whatever we ask, answer us, and allow us to sit on your right and left side in heaven." That's the request. After Jesus has just told them what is about to happen, he's going to suffer and die on a cross, and he's going to raise from the dead, they go, "But hey, let us sit on your right and left side in heaven." They're only worried about their own glory and their own honor. Why? Because they are prideful. The root of all of our sin is pride. And they can't help but focus on themselves when the suffering servant is right in front of them explaining what is about to happen to him. It's pretty shocking. And as we approach our theme verse, we see in sharp contrast the suffering servant, Jesus Christ, and the prideful disciples. Jesus will be the ultimate example of humility and service. And I just want to read for you Mark 10 and look down at verse 43. Mark 10:43. And let's read that together, okay? It says, "But it is not this way among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you, you shall be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you shall be slave of all." And here's our theme verse, Mark 10:45. "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." This is why Jesus came. Throughout the entire Gospel of Mark, we see Jesus as what? The servant. Jesus as servant. And throughout his entire ministry, this is what he does. He serves until the ultimate act of humble service, dying on the cross. All of his miracles, all of his signs are pointing to this greater miracle where Jesus would die and raise again from the dead. Really incredible. The suffering servant, okay? So, Jesus is the ultimate example of humility and service. So we've seen point number 1, the reward for Christians. Point number 2, the preview of Jesus' death and resurrection. Point number 3, the servant, why he came in the prideful hearts of his disciples. And now point number 4, we see one last healing recorded in this gospel, verses 46 through 52. Jesus makes another blind man see again after he shows his faith in Jesus. And Jesus goes, "Because of your faith, I will heal you and I will make you see." So we know that all these miracles, again, like I just said, that Jesus is performing, this is the last healing recorded in this gospel. But all the healings, all the miracles, we'll see one more miracle to come. They're all pointing to the greater miracle, Jesus dying on the cross and raising from the dead. Okay? What an awesome passage. It was longer than we've been doing, but wasn't it awesome? The suffering servant. This is why Jesus came. To serve, not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Do you believe in that? What will you do now to become more like Christ and to be a servant like he was, to act with humility like he did? Not like the prideful disciples, but like Jesus, our humble, suffering servant. So I've got 3 questions for you. Number 1, what is the great reward that Jesus gives us once we give up everything to follow him? And why is this reward so great? What is the reward we talked about? Why is this so sweet? How does that comfort you that we get this sweet reward? Number 2, how can you change to live more like the suffering servant rather than the prideful disciples? So be practical. What things in your life right now can you identify and change to be less prideful, less focused on yourself, and more like the suffering servant? What can you change? Number 3, here it is, the final time, and then maybe we'll go on to another memory verse because you've got this one down. Write down from memory Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. That's just a sweet verse to memorize and to think about, to pray over. So I hope that you do. The suffering servant, awesome. And now we're going to see actually Jesus do what he's been saying he's about to do as we enter his final week, and that's in Mark 11 to 16. Okay, so love you guys. See you guys tomorrow.